Have you ever felt there's a version of yourself hidden away, waiting for the perfect moment to emerge? Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy might just hold the key to unlocking that secret. In today's exploration, we'll delve into his rebellious ideas on individuality, purpose, and what it really means to become who you are. Strap in for a fun, eye-opening journey through the mind of one of the most provocative thinkers in modern history and beyond. Enjoy. Friedrich Nietzsche was born on October 15, 1844, in the small town of Rocken, located in what was then Saxony in Prussia. At first glance, his early childhood might sound ordinary, but destiny had some dramatic twists in store. By the time he was 5, tragedy struck when his father, a Lutheran pastor, passed away from a mysterious illness. As if that wasn't traumatic enough, his younger brother died shortly after. It's no surprise that early heartbreak would shape Nietzsche's worldview in ways he couldn't have imagined at the time. One might picture young Friedrich as a gloomy little boy clutching a philosophy book instead of a teddy bear, but that's a bit of an exaggeration. While he was introverted and likely more thoughtful than most kids his age, he also had a playful side. He grew up surrounded by strong women, his mother, sister, and grandmother, who held the family together. This female-centric upbringing would later influence his reflections on morality, religion, and society, though not always in the ways one might expect. Amidst all these family sorrows, Nietzsche excelled academically, quickly revealing a sharp mind and an appetite for learning. Some accounts suggest that his intelligence was apparent from a very young age. Locals nicknamed him the Little Pastor, thinking he'd follow in his father's footsteps. Life, as it turned out, had other ideas. In his teenage years, Nietzsche attended prestigious schools where he demonstrated brilliance in languages and literature. Initially, it seemed he was destined for a life of theological study. Yet beneath that scholarly exterior lurked a growing skepticism, one that would eventually lead him down a controversial path. At the University of Bonn, and later at the University of Leipzig, Nietzsche pursued studies in theology and classical philology. This was a time when he was still somewhat connected to Christian doctrine, though cracks were beginning to form. It's often said that university is where innocence goes to die, or at least gets a really good beating. For Nietzsche, it was the era where he discovered that the religious beliefs he grew up with no longer resonated. Instead of reaffirming his faith, his deep dive into historical texts, ancient languages, and critical scholarship left him questioning traditional religious doctrines. The more he pored over ancient Greek and Roman works, the more he was inspired by their human-centered values and heroic ideals rather than the Christian worldview. His faith might have been on the decline, but his reputation as a philological prodigy soared. At just 24, he became a professor at the University of Basel, one of the youngest ever appointed to such a position. This move was extraordinary, a testament to his intellectual prowess. Yet the academic world, with its strict protocols and gentle illusions of stability, didn't quite vibe with Nietzsche's restless spirit. Health problems, including severe migraines and digestive issues, started creeping into his life. The discomfort with both body and mind fueled his critique of modern society and deepened his rejection of established norms. Leaving academia wasn't just about dealing with migraines or an aversion to faculty meetings. It was about forging a bold new path. Nietzsche quit his professorship in 1879, opting to live off a modest pension. This was the moment he began focusing heavily on writing, setting the stage for the philosophical fireworks soon to come. Far from being a comfortable retiree, he became a nomad of sorts, traveling through Switzerland, Italy, and France. He was in constant search of a climate that would ease his ailments, physical, mental, and perhaps existential too. During this wandering phase, Nietzsche developed a unique style that blended razor-sharp wit, poetic flair, and an unapologetic attack on complacent thinking. He critiqued what he saw as the herd mentality, that unreflective acceptance of social norms and moral values. For Nietzsche, the idea that our morality is handed to us by tradition or religion was about as welcome as a pebble in a shoe. He believed that blindly following mass opinions suffocated individual creativity and blocked genuine self-discovery. His writing became bolder, almost like philosophical mic drops on every page. If you've ever read a few of his aphorisms, you might have caught yourself thinking, did he just say that? Indeed, he did, and with swagger. Books like The Gay Science, which introduced the famous God is dead phrase, and Thus Spoke Zarathustra, quickly placed him on the fringes of intellectual society. Think of him as the guy at a polite dinner party who flips the table just to see everyone's reaction, and then calmly explains why the table needed flipping in the first place. If there's one concept that's guaranteed to spark a lively conversation right after mentioning pineapple on pizza, it's Nietzsche's idea of the Übermensch, often translated as the Overman or Superman. This concept, popularized in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, can be tricky. One might picture a caped crusader soaring through the skies, or an overly confident bodybuilder flexing in front of the mirror. Nietzsche, however, was aiming for something deeper and more nuanced. At its core, the Übermensch represents an individual who dares to transcend conventional morality and societal norms, someone who creates their own values rather than inheriting them from religion, tradition, or peer pressure. In Nietzsche's view, we're often limited by the moral framework we accept without question, frameworks that define what's good or evil. He wanted people to break free from these inherited systems and shape a personal ethic that genuinely reflects who they are. For him, this wasn't about being better than everyone else in a vain or arrogant sense, but about forging a path beyond the confines of limiting beliefs. Of course, this notion has fueled controversies. Some critics argue that the Übermensch idea flirts with elitism or condones trampling on the weak. Nietzsche's defenders often point out that he was no fan of brute power. Instead, he championed a heightened form of personal excellence, grounded in creativity, courage, and authenticity. Still, the misunderstandings abound, not least because Nietzsche's sister, Elizabeth, later manipulated some of his manuscripts and introduced biases that suited her own ideological leanings. It's an unfortunate twist that continues to affect how people interpret Nietzsche's most daring ideas. If Nietzsche's philosophy were a rock band, Will to Power would be its chart-topping hit. This concept is sometimes interpreted as a raw desire to dominate others, which isn't entirely accurate. Sure, the phrase sounds like it might be the motto of a movie villain, but Nietzsche was aiming for something more complex and personal. The will to power is our fundamental drive to assert ourselves, to overcome limitations, and to push the boundaries of what's possible. This isn't necessarily about bossing people around or mustering political might. It's about self-mastery. For Nietzsche, life is an ongoing challenge course. Every obstacle, be it physical illness, social pressure, or existential dread, is an opportunity to develop inner strength. He believed suffering was inevitable, but not something to be dodged with bubble wrap or pretentious positivity. Instead, suffering becomes the raw material for growth. He often used the term self-overcoming to describe the process of grappling with hardship and emerging stronger. Think of it like climbing a mountain. The rocks might scrape your knees, and the altitude might leave you gasping, but each struggle inching you closer to the summit is precisely what makes the ascent meaningful. Yet, for all his focus on overcoming adversity, Nietzsche never promised that life would suddenly become a blissful field of daisies and sunshine. Anyone who's ever read his blistering critiques of comfort culture can guess he wasn't a feel-good philosopher. He was more like a tough love coach, urging us to dig deeper into our willpower and transform struggle into triumph. It's an outlook that resonates with many who feel trapped by modern life's superficial niceties. One might imagine Nietzsche holding up in a cabin somewhere, penning revolutionary thoughts by candlelight, fueled by sheer genius. In reality, his existence was more complicated and less romantic than that. Yes, he did spend a lot of time alone, hopping between boarding houses in the Swiss Alps and the Italian Riviera, seeking relief from his perpetual migraines and eyesight problems. Sometimes the only company he had was his own swirling ideas. But it was precisely this solitude that became the incubator for his philosophical works. During this period of near-perpetual wandering, he wrote some of his most influential books, including Beyond Good and Evil and On the Genealogy of Morality. Strangely enough, Nietzsche often complained about the noise in boarding houses. Imagine him trying to compose a world-altering treatise while the neighbors downstairs are arguing about who forgot to take out the trash. It's almost comedic, yet in that comedic frustration, a new depth of clarity emerged in his work. His health might have been declining, but his ideas were catching fire in the pages he meticulously filled. For a man who had so much to say about individualism, it's telling that he had relatively few close friendships. He was an admirer of the composer Richard Wagner until their strong ideological differences and Wagner's increasing anti-Semitism drove them apart. Nietzsche's romantic life wasn't exactly a fairy tale either. Rumors swirled that he contracted syphilis, possibly during his time as a medical orderly in the Franco-Prussian War, though the exact cause of his health decline remains a topic of debate. Whichever version of the story you believe, it's clear his physical ailments played a significant role in his reclusive lifestyle and intense creative output. Sometimes, solitude can be the unwitting catalyst for genius. Nietzsche's philosophy has endured its fair share of controversies. For starters, his declaration, "God is dead," has been read, reread, and misread countless times. Some interpret it as a triumphant atheist victory chant, while others see it as a lament, pointing to society's loss of a central moral framework. He wasn't out in the streets chanting, "Woohoo, we did it," but rather noting that Western thought no longer anchored itself in religious certainty. This leaves a void that can lead to nihilism if not filled by new, self-created values. Of course, there's the persistent rumor that Nietzsche's ideas inspired extremist ideologies. It's true that his sister, Elizabeth, had some unsavory ties and did manipulate her brother's papers to make them appear sympathetic to nationalism and anti-Semitism, views Nietzsche himself opposed. If there's a philosophical equivalent to having your diaries heavily edited by a dubious family member, Nietzsche lived that nightmare. Consequently, the Nazi regime later cherry-picked passages from his works to legitimize their agenda, ignoring the parts where Nietzsche condemned anti-Semitism and German nationalism. Let's just say he would have likely been horrified by the misappropriation of his words. Another hot topic is whether his emphasis on individualism and self-creation is realistic for everyone. Critics argue that not everyone has the resources, freedom, or even the temperament to craft an entirely new moral code. Even admirers must acknowledge that Nietzsche sets a high bar. Self-overcoming is not exactly a casual Sunday stroll, but that's also part of his magnetism. The sheer audacity of daring people to invent themselves outside the boundaries of conventional morality. Love him or hate him, you can't accuse Nietzsche of aiming low. Although he died in 1900, shortly after a devastating mental collapse, Nietzsche's legacy has been anything but forgotten. In fact, if you watch modern debates on personal freedom, self-help gurus touting mindset mastery, or even rebellious pop stars screaming about living life on their own terms, you'll catch echoes of Nietzsche's philosophies. Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung drew upon some of his insights about human drives and the human psyche. Continental philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus, and Michael Foucault found in Nietzsche a wellspring of ideas that fueled existentialism, postmodernism, and critiques of power structures. In art, literature, and culture, his influences are widespread. Take a look at your favorite author's preface or a thought-provoking movie's screenplay notes, and you might see a nod to Nietzsche in there. The man who was largely unappreciated in his own time has become an intellectual superstar. It's almost ironic, given his solitary life and the fact that much of his work was produced in the shadows of chronic pain and near blindness. Yet, there's something undeniably timeless about his clarion call to become who you really are. It goes beyond philosophical jargon. It resonates with anyone who's ever felt boxed in by tradition, stifled by routine, or eager to break free from the old "this is just how things are done" mentality. Nietzsche's challenge is both inspiring and daunting. Can we truly reinvent ourselves? And if we do, what are the mental and moral costs? Now, don't get me wrong. Becoming your own person might not require you to forsake modern conveniences or wave goodbye to your community. In all seriousness, it's the mindset that matters, a willingness to question assumptions and carve out your own meaning. And that is precisely why middle-aged Americans, and just about everyone else, can find his ideas thrilling, even if they don't agree with every provocative line he wrote. The fundamental question of how to imbue life with meaning, especially when old certainties fade, is as relevant today as it was in Nietzsche's era. Jokes aside, Friedrich Nietzsche's bold ideas continue to challenge, inspire, and even unsettle us. Whether or not you're prepared to adopt his call for radical self-creation, you can't deny he knew how to rattle the status quo. Hope you found this video helpful and a bit entertaining, and maybe now you're tempted to dig into some of his books. If you enjoyed this journey into Nietzsche's world, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Becoming who you really are is a work in progress, so let's keep exploring together. Thanks for watching.